Mr Speaker.
I call the honourable member Shane Ardern.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker,
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to rise and speak in the address and reply and vote of confidence to the John Key-led National Government. And there's a number of reasons why I say that. The first is that the National-led government is the only political choice for people who want to see a growing, stable economy that will create jobs for Kiwis, those Kiwis that are focused and want to get on in life. That is why our economy remains front and centre for this government over the next term in Parliament. And that is why we have a program ahead of us to improve the surplus or the economic circumstances to return us to surplus in the next term and a bit. It's also why we intend to spend the amount of money that we do to rebuild Christchurch. And it's also, Mr Speaker, why we have introduced a number of reforms in our time so far, such as the introduction of the 90-day trial period and the changes to the RMA system, and also why we have invested so heavily in returning ACC back into financial shape. It's also why we've kick-started the multi-billion-dollar program on infrastructure investment. And all through that time, we've been dealing with three major challenges, Mr Speaker. An economy that was left in an unbalanced and in a poor shape by the previous government. Interesting to note the comments of the previous speaker in regard to unemployment when you look at that. The impact of the global financial crisis and, of course, the Canterbury earthquakes. New Zealand has to become a magnet for investment, Mr Speaker, by individuals, small businesses, New Zealand and offshore. We have to create business opportunities to create jobs for hard-working New Zealanders. Without more investments that benefit New Zealand, we can't have jobs and we can't have growth in the New Zealand economy. What is it about that our Labour opponents find difficult to understand? The one is a prerequisite to the other, and there are no exceptions. The government is working hard to encourage investment through our business growth agenda by reducing costs and uncertainty for business, ensuring our people have the right skills to contribute. The government's recent announcements for youth training and apprenticeship courses aligned with industry to best meet the demands to develop work opportunities and training opportunities for young New Zealanders has been welcomed by all industries, but in particular, Mr Speaker, the rural farming industries. Our apprenticeship schemes will provide the skills and opportunity, particularly for people in the trades that service the farming sector, but equally so in the farming sector itself. And there has been, Mr Speaker, quite a vacuum in this area for some time. So those announcements are very welcome and will have an undoubted effect on the New Zealand economy. For business to invest in plant and facilities in New Zealand, they need to be confident that they will have access to infrastructure and there will be support through transport, energy, water and telecommunications to sustain those businesses. We've rolled out billions of dollars in investment in infrastructure over the past 4 years, which is supporting thousands of jobs and will continue to increase the opportunity for those jobs. But unlike our opponents, we won't just throw money at the problem. We're committed to fixing roadblocks like the RMA that are slowing the process down and driving up costs. We want to work cooperatively with local councils to reduce the amount of costly red tape, Mr Speaker. New Zealand has abundant natural resources. The government is taking a hard look at how our resources are managed so we can continue to grow our economy and look after our environment. The government is working on a comprehensive package of reforms through the resource management system, which will release in the next few months and progress with our better local government reforms. New Zealand is a strong exporting nation. We're committed to increasing the contribution that exports make to our economy by aggressively pursuing more higher quality trade agreements. Mr Speaker, the opportunities in Asia and in particularly the China economies are enormous. Equally so in our Indian trade agreements. And Mr Speaker, it's amazing to know that there are members in this House that would oppose that type of progress. And it defies logic why you might do that. Our primary sector, Mr. Speaker, is an important contributor to our export earnings. In fact, there is no other more important contributor. 72% of our merchandise exports access to water and to the primary production structures are essential, Mr. Speaker, when you look at developing an economy that's sustainable. We're establishing a company to act as bridging investor for regional water infrastructure development, and we will invest up to $400 million in regional scale schemes to encourage third-party capital investment, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the government earmarked $80 million for the initial stages of the company's operations, and that will be set aside in the 2013 budget. Reliable irrigation presents a major step in unlocking economic potential for New Zealand. Having our tradable sectors grow strongly, delivering on the government's economic growth goals is a #1 objective of this government. I hope that the rural and provincial New Zealanders that are listening to this debate and others that may listen in on future debates take note of what our opponents are saying. For example, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition stated in his speech to the nation that the reality is we will not create more better paying jobs by simply exporting more milk powder. How wrong is that? How naive and ignorant is that, Mr. Speaker? How far off course can you be? Some of the very high-end, sophisticated nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals and high-end food ingredient powders that are now processed in some of the largest manufacturing processing sites in the world here in our dairy industry, Mr. Speaker, hold one of the strongest keys to extra growth in this economy. And that can be done in a very sustainable, clean, green way. When you look at what the Leader of the Opposition is proposing, he's proposing an increase in industry. Now, that's not a bad thing. In fact, increases in industry will generally lead to more jobs and more exports. But you're talking about the industrialisation of New Zealand in terms of its economy. What effects would that have, Mr. Speaker, on the environment? What sort of effects do you create on the environment when you surge forward entirely focused in the industrial area, as opposed to agriculture? Measure it credibly and sensibly against the effects of agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest the effects on the environment are far more. Labor has not changed its ideology since the 1980s, when the then Prime Minister David Lange described agriculture as a sunset industry. So 71% of our merchandise export earnings is a sunset industry. Well, certainly under Labor it would be, because their vision, Mr. Speaker, for the New Zealand economy is a capital gains tax, higher income tax, higher company tax, an emissions trading tax, no support for irrigation systems, higher ACC levies, no more 90-day trial periods for employments, rural New Zealand stuck in a dial-up age, less road construction, more unproductive spending and more debt. Mr. Speaker, is there any mix of policies that could be more contrast and more backward-looking and less likely to grow the New Zealand economy than those? Mr. Speaker, and it gets worse, because for Labor to be in government, they'd have to coalesce with the Greens. Now, just have a look at what the Greens have said. They would go harder than Labor on the emissions trading tax. They would put a restriction on livestock numbers. They would put a restriction on water use. They would put a restriction on nitrate or nitrogen applications. Mr. Speaker, the comparison is black and white. And clearly, Mr. Speaker, it does not favour a Labor, Green and who knows who coalition government. And if you think by living in an urban environment in your house in Auckland or Wellington, you are safe from these changes, then I would suggest to you, think again. Because if our agricultural sector does not prosper and grow, then nor will our urban areas. It's that simple. 71% of our merchandise exports from this sector, Mr Speaker. Well, the agricultural sector is the highest employer, both directly and indirectly, in New Zealand, Mr Speaker, and I would suggest to you a change of government at this stage would be devastating to the New Zealand economy. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Honourable Marianne